Hey everyone, welcome back to our SFC podcast. I'm Zoo, your host. This is our second episode of the year. This is going to be a great one. We have Jewell from Pepsi. She started her career in tech, then went and did an MBA from top business school, and then now works at Pepsi in their StratFin team. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jewell Jones. I'm a finance manager in the corporate FP&A group at PepsiCo. Right before Pepsi, I was in business school at Columbia. And before Columbia, I had a very long career in tech.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jewell, for being here. Let's start with that long career in tech first. You obviously spent a bunch of years doing a lot of different types of tech work or tech infrastructure work. Did you enjoy it? How did you decide you want to get into there? And then eventually, what made you decide to move and go do an MBA and then now work in StratFin?
I love that question every time someone asks because I feel like I have an unusual start in tech.
Yeah, let's hear
So
it.
as a kid, I actually taught myself to code. And this was before a time where they had all these fancy coding camps. I don't think Google was even popular at that time, or even a thing. We're talking about like dial-up type of internet
Nice.
that at that time. So I learned I taught myself to code around that time, and I loved art, graphic design, and got into creating websites, and it just kind of stuck with me all the way through undergrad, and that's what I focused on undergrad. Business information systems was my undergraduate major. I did a couple of like tech internships or part-time jobs while I was in school. And my first job right out of school was at a firm that was eventually acquired by SAP. So it's kind of been with me since I was a little kid, and as an adult, it's paid the bills. I've loved it for the entire time. It's just as my career progressed. After SAP, I went over to Accenture. I went back to SAP for a short stint, and then I went over to a startup focused on other type of cloud technologies. And right before business school, I was at a bank in their investment management technology company. And once I got to the bank, I was like, that was a big shift for me because all of a sudden I heard a lot of people talking about finance in a different way. To me, it sounded like a different language and a language that I wasn't as familiar with. And I was like, oh, it'd be really great to move over into this space and actually learn the language. And I've always had an affinity for numbers, and, from teaching myself to code, that whole logic type of thinking,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, okay, to fill this gap, I need to go back to school. So I thought I only applied to one school. Luckily, let me in. Not recommended for anyone who's looking at it. I know a lot of younger early career people look at this, and not recommended. Definitely apply to more schools, but I applied to Columbia and focused on finance and accounting as well. Needed to brush up on a lot of different areas with the intent to find a role where I could play a major part in helping companies make decisions on the future and kind of using finance as a way to do that.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's almost you almost define strategic finance there and exactly what you want to do, what you want to do. I mean, I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball. So, with someone with your background, it's you know, I would see that kind of professional come through an MBA program and then go work at a tech company. A lot of the folks that I have the privilege of like interviewing or hosting on the show work at tech companies. So, what made you decide to go to a CPG company and then Pepsi obviously being a massive one out there? Was it sort of like you've done enough tech, or did you want to explore a new business, or did you want to leverage what you've learned?
I think a lot of all the above. I
Okay.
wanted to do something different in a different area. I've been exposed to many different sides of tech: project management, working with engineers, working with project managers, program managers, up and down, working how to sell it, how to build it, didn't matter. And I still wanted to work for a global company as well.
Okay.
That was important to me. I love working for global companies. I like working for big companies and the fact that you have a lot of opportunities to move around without leaving the actual company. I love also working for companies that have a legacy in terms of brand as well. And it helps when they're all in my backyard of New York. So Pepsi, their world headquarters is in Purchase, New York, right outside of Manhattan. So to me, it was just a great opportunity to try this CPG space or consumer product goods. And luckily, I like a lot of the products as well. So it's been great learning more about the business while also learning this fairly new skill set and growing in that area as well.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to touch on a little bit about the global company and a big company. A lot of the folks who come into our academy have this question. They're always come and say, "Hey, should we go work for a large, big company, or should we go work for a seed Series A, Series B company?" I currently work at a Series E stage company, but I've seen both sides. I've been at a Series A, and now I've at a Series E. You seem to like the big, large global company. One thing you mentioned was that you can move around. Anything else that you specifically sort of enjoy or a reason you targeted a large company?
Well, I find that companies like this attract talent that I would probably want to learn from as well, overall, from if you're talking about at senior levels. And I find that a lot of companies like this as well. They provide really good training, very hands on training as well. I've worked at a small company, and even though small companies have had offices in different countries around the world, I find that sometimes when they're private equity backed or just smaller in nature, sometimes they don't have that platform in a lot of cases
Yeah.
to really help you grow in a way, especially if you're changing careers like I did coming into Pepsi. They may not have all the tools in place where to meet the style, at least that I needed to grow and learn in my career. Not saying they're not out there, but sometimes I would say, as a rule of thumb, they're usually at a bigger company because there's a lot of people that need to be trained, a lot of bringing in early talent career programs, a lot of career switchers, like they already had those mechanisms in place.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I think back to when I left investment banking and joined Uber. They, even though it was early stage, they had an incredible training platform. They called it Uberversity.
Hmm.
And then I left and then joined a Series A, and I was the one coming up with the training.
Exactly. You're coming in as the expert. I did
Yeah.
really well at a small company because I had left those bigger companies that were really good at training, had that consulting background, and I was able to do a little things a little bit more quickly and adapt. I'm grateful that I had that background coming in, because I think if it were the other way around, I probably wouldn't have done as well.
Okay, yeah. I think I like that. We're definitely going to use that. Cool. Let's talk a little bit more about strategic finance at Pepsi. We've covered here a few times the differences between maybe FP&A and strategic finance. You know, some things we've touched on in the past is FP&A is a little bit more setting up the processes, getting your books and getting your reporting down. And then strategic finance usually is the platform that kind of comes on top or sits right next to it and uses all those processes to now do um, work that helps, as you said earlier, drive business decisions, right? Does that align with how Pepsi sees it? Is that how sort of like the role looks like at Pepsi?
Okay, so I'm going to blow all of that out of the water.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So at the company, you can work in FP&A and be strategic finance, which is technically what I do. I work in corporate FP&A, even though my official title as far as hiring is current strategic finance, but I work in corporate FP&A. And I would say the way we look at it is that someone who sits in the finance organization who helps the business make decisions about the future leveraging that finance information, that data, the reporting. So that I would say, in all simplicity, that's what it is as it relates to finance. We're also at at the table when it comes to making those big decisions as well. We're not some person sitting in the corner in the back you never talk to. No, we're at the table helping the business make those decisions. And that's one of the top reasons I wanted to come here, because I talk to a lot of companies, and sometimes they're the people in the back room. And I think that is often the misconception around working in finance within a corporate environment, that, oh, they're working in the back room, they're not really tying there on the machines. I'm like, no, no, not here. We're helping drive, we're helping influence. We may not be the person with the final say, but we're definitely helping change the direction, influence the direction, and help those decisions be made.
Wow, that's really nice to hear. I'm going to ask you in a couple of minutes on like maybe a couple of projects, but I want to hear your thoughts because it seems like you have a couple on why you think Pepsi is successful at having this sort of finance function at the table. Because I've had friends from my business school who've gone to other CPG companies. I'm not going to name them, but when we chat in our WhatsApp groups and in our other like communities, they don't feel like what you were mentioning,
Mhm.
and it absolutely didn't feel like what it felt like when I was at Uber or these other strategic finance role. Why do you think that is? What do you think Pepsi nailed with their finance team there?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, but I think one thing we have to think about is the industry. So if we think of consumer product goods, you're really trying to push against the margins
Okay.
compared to, especially in a product where it's available to the masses, as opposed to, say, luxury good items where you can get a lot out of pricing, and those margins, are much different. But if a place like Pepsi have to, if pricing, you can only do so much there to what the consumers can handle, a lot of times, and this is where I focus on it, you got to think about costs. You got a fixed amount, and sometimes that amount shifts. What are the trade-offs? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? How are we going to slice and dice where we're allocating funds? Whether it's a very good year, whether it's a bad year, it doesn't matter. You have to make certain decisions about how those resources are allocated. So I think that is something that is unique to, especially if you're talking about a lot of CPGs where the margins are on the lower end. So that's one thing. But I also think something that's special to like a lot of investment banks and a lot of some of the tech firms and CPGs, they're very good, back to my point earlier around training, and helping connect the dots to what you're doing. And sometimes when I started, I was like, what am I doing? Like, how does this? I don't feel like I'm influencing anything. But then, you have the people around you and say, okay, this is where this goes and where this information ends up. So it's like, oh, Jewel, yeah, you may look like you're doing the small part as far as what our global CFO and our CFO is focused on. This is how directly how you tie. I think Pepsi has I, I never say rotational program is a rotational culture. So whether
I
you're
see.
an analyst, a financial analyst, or you're a manager or you're a VP, they want you changing around. They want you to see many different types of the business, and regardless of the type of role that you have in finance. So by the time you reach the very top, you understand a lot about the business, a lot of ways to look at the financials and different perspectives, and also just get a sense of, how the business works overall to make even better decisions, the longer time that you're here. So I think that is something special to a lot of companies like Pepsi in particular. And they used to call them academy companies, where they had that training program in place. And if you decided you wanted to leave, you have a pretty good foundation for what they've taught you
Yeah.
that stage in your career. So I think they're just really good at training and helping me tie the dots to things. I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, if it's even making a difference, but no, they're like, no, Jewel, you have a big job. Is what you're doing is important. So I think the leaders that I have around me are very good. I work very closely with one of our I work on a small team and we work very closely to one of our CFOs who's great. So I feel like I'm learning a lot working here, which is exactly what I wanted to become a better financial leader myself.
Right. This is a great promotional ad, by the way, for Pepsi. Quick question. You mentioned that there's a little bit of not so much a rotational program, but different parts of the business they want to get exposure to. At a high level, I'm curious, and I'm sure everyone else will be. What are the different parts of the business that, like a finance manager or anybody in the finance team can work through?
So, I mean, we don't have enough time to list them all, but I will
Yeah,
give you an
yeah.
example. So I work in FP&A. That's a common role within Pepsi as far as your core day-to-day responsibility, closing books, forecasting, that sort of thing. But I'm in the corporate expense area. So you could move to an FP&A role within our revenue generating businesses.
Got
And
it.
let's say if you didn't want to be an FP&A, well, you can do transformation projects. A lot of corporate finance, strategic finance involves, make sure we are enabling parts of our businesses in a digital manner, knowing that we need the business to focus on the business, not so much of how to get data, how to report on it, metrics, that sort of thing, how to manage performance. We need to allow them to get to that data in a very quick manner and an efficient manner. So it could be a transformation type of project. It could be in one of our teams for a particular client, sales finance. We need someone to handle the finance and measurements of that. So there's different parts of the business, not just FP&A, but you got sales, you got technology, you got marketing, finance, which is always fun. Right? I mean, if you think of like big events, sporting events, we have a Gatorade business, lots of things that we sponsor. So you can do a lot of things in finance that are beyond, I feel like, what a lot of people usually think of when they think of corporate finance. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it can be fun. It can be really fun. We also have an A group as well, you as a former banker, so that's a team as well. Legal, like we need people to manage the finance and help these teams make decisions as well.
Okay. Awesome. Uh, Slightly off topic. Did you bet on what color the Gatorade was going to be in the Super Bowl?
I did not. No, no, no betting, no betting, no betting, no betting. I will say, like, of course, it's nice to work for a company that's plays a very big part in, these types of events. I love sports. I
Yeah.
grew up on Gatorade as a kid playing soccer and until
Same here.
recently running these marathons in New York City, and Gatorade has been my go-to for a very, very long time. But I'm always excited about the new products that come out. I'm a fan of Gatorade water more these days. So I'm glad that they recently came out that, and then a company we acquired, CHA. I'm so excited for that to be in our ecosystem as far as products are concerned.
Nice. I didn't bet, or the friends we had over didn't bet, but we were all sold that it's going to be green. When we learned it was yellow or orange, we were like, oh, okay, never
I
mind.
know, my favorite.
I know we have a couple minutes. I'm going to ask you two more questions. One, just on a small case study or some sort of, I guess, mini project that you, as you've been at Pepsi, and what you've either accomplished or how you've helped unlock a new strategy or something along those lines. Is there anything you can share with us?
Well, I mean, as we get out of 2024 and move into 2025, new a lot of new things happening in the world that we probably weren't planning for, to be quite honest. And I think a lot of people in strategic finance will come across this, and it's not a particular distinct project, but it's something that happens year, and it is a project on itself, and that's getting through our annual budget.
Okay. Yeah.
and deciding, given the economic uncertainty, what do the investments look like for 2025? So we do have multiple phases that we go through as far as the annual budgeting process. So it was my first time through it, and just seeing that process, like it's run like a machine. Lots of input, as you can imagine, from around the world
Yep.
in terms of the number of teams and people involved and things we probably want to improve and prioritize, invest. I think, going through that process, working through all the teams and sharing, okay, based on what we did in fiscal year 2024, or what we think, because it starts, a lot of companies start this process summer before the fiscal year. So for all of you out there wanting to get into strategic finance, I think being a part of that annual budgeting process definitely recommended, because you get to see a lot of um, how I think the way you spend your money is sometimes a strong correlation to the way you want to move going forward. And it was interesting seeing, and you'll see it play out come 2025, and heard it talk a little bit in our 2024 Q4 earnings call, but kind of what we're wanting to focus on in 2025 as far as investments are concerned. So I would say getting through that process is always a project in itself. And we're pretty much finished with the process, not like 100%, but we're basically there. And I think going through that, I played a small part in it. And again, I say small part, but I know it's important to the company, and it makes a difference. But just having that opportunity just to see how the process flows, I think is really eye opening, and seeing how people on many, many levels above me, this is the direction we're going, and we're going to shift um, our allocations of things accordingly. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see, and not something I imagined that I would see so early being here. But I'm glad to be in the corporate FP&A, and especially in the FP&A role, to be able to see how we make those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I recruit for a role similar to this, I always say it's a privilege to be able to be in this kind of role, in the annual planning role or budgeting
Mm-hmm.
role, because you see so much, you get so much insight in exactly to what you're saying on like how the company's making decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
then those decisions are influenced by macroeconomic factors, all these different sort of like stuff outside of your organization. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
And it's a huge privilege to be in that function.
Yeah, it's a privilege, but realistically, sometimes it gets kind of crazy, and you're
But
like, oh
yeah,
my God, I want this to be over with. I want this to be over with. But I mean, it's when it's done and you see it, and then throughout the year you're tracking it as it's being implemented. It's really exciting, and that's not something I saw in consulting or all my tech roles, because in consulting, and as you know with banking, you're done with the deal, you're done with the project, you go to the next one. You may check on it later after it ends, but 9 times out of 10, you're not. And you don't know how the story fully ends. So it's nice to see the beginning, and I'll be here to see how everything comes about at the end of the year as well. So I'm
yep.
excited about that.
All right, we'll just cut. I will stop.